This section is going to talk about a few of the parts of the cell that are important, that are tied to other topics that other videos will cover, as well as what's single cell versus multicellular, why that is an important difference, and also we're going to look at some organizational things as far as cells go. So we're going to start off here with organelles, specifically the organelles for energy. So organelles, again, are found in eukaryotic cells. So those cells that have nuclei or nucleus for storing the DNA. So nucleus is one organelle. The organelles for energy are the two that we have here. So the first one we're going to look at is the mitochondria. So we've got a picture of mitochondria over here. We got the little cartoon version, and then this is an actual electron micrograph of a mitochondria, so taken with one of those electron microscopes I talked about in an earlier video. So these are found in all eukaryotes, so whether you are a plant, a fungus, a protist, or an animal, you're going to have mitochondria. And why are you going to have mitochondria? Because these are incredibly important. They're going to take food like glucose and other food molecules and turn it into usable energy. So these, you may have heard of mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's like a common thing that is in every video. But I like to think of the mitochondria more like a generator or a car engine, because that's really what's going on here. You're going to feed it fuel, glucose in this case, and it's going to turn it into energy to make you work. So that's why, for example, if you exercise, you need more energy, you need more food, because you're going to have these little guys in your cells taking that food and turning it from the food energy into usable energy to run your cells, your muscles, and so forth, and you use it up. So we've got these mitochondria that are going to be found in all the eukaryotes. Now, on the other hand, this guy over here that we've got the cartoon version of are chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are only found in plants and algae. So plants and some of the protists. Protists are single-celled organisms that don't really belong to plants or animals. These guys are going to convert sunlight into sugar. So it's going to take sun and the energy from sunlight and turn it into sugar. So it's going to take that kinetic energy from light and turn it into chemical energy. This is actually where all of that energy comes from for all of us, which talked about back when we looked at different types of energy. So you can thank a plant or thank some algae because they not only provide us with oxygen, which is what most people think of when they think of a plant, but they also provide us with our food. Even if you're eating something that's meat-based, that meat actually ate a plant at some point. And so that's why we are interested in these two. Plus, they also power the cells that we're going to be talking about going forward. This organelle, this is found in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. It's not truly an organelle. It's more of just a little unit that is in the cells. So ribosomes, these guys are going to take directions, copies of the directions from the DNA. And so that's what this little guy is, the mRNA. That's a copy of the DNA. They're going to read it and make proteins. So a lot of the material in your cell is actually made out of protein. Different types of proteins that have been folded up and stuffed in there in different ways. The ribosomes are the protein factories. And so these guys are going to help build your proteins out of amino acids. So the molecules that are floating around They're insanely important and needed for both types of cells in order to build most of what is making up those cells. So next thing to look at is what makes up basically the muscles and bones of a cell. So that is what we call the cytoskeleton. So this is a system of fibers that help give the cell its shape, help it move, and help it divide. So if you look down here, I've got some pictures that I grabbed. These are of cells where just the different parts of the cytoskeleton have been sketched in. So you can see here, this is one part of the cytoskeleton, what we call the intermediate filaments. These parts over here are the other parts of the cytoskeleton, the microfilaments and the microtubules. I'm not going to ask you to know their names, but if you lay all of these over together, basically the entire cell has a skeleton around it. So around the outside, just underneath the plasma membrane, and then these fibers actually go all the way through as a network in the cell. So these can be pulled on, they can be pushed so that the cell can move around. This isn't necessarily going to need to be done in something like ourselves, but if you're a single cell organism, like one of these guys, these are all different single-celled organisms. They are going to need to be able to move around. And that actually is tied to this section that just popped up so I could get the pictures as well. So cilia and flagella are attached to this cytoskeleton. So cilia and flagella are what you can see in this picture. So cilia are these little hair-like structures, and flagella are the tails that are here. And there's a video I will have linked separately so that you can see these in action on different types of organisms, as well as cilia in humans. So what are they used for? Mainly, these are used for movement. So you've got flagella. We saw flagella show up in prokaryotes. Some of the eukaryotes can have flagella as well. So they're going to use them, they're going to whip them around like tails so that they can swim. Cilia are going to be used, as you'll see in the video, they're going to be used to push the organism, so they can push them like little paddles. Some of the organisms are going to use their cilia to move water towards them, so they can basically turn themselves into a vacuum. We actually have cilia in a couple of places in humans. One of those places is in our lungs, which is actually really interesting, and you'll see that in the video. They show you the lung cells. We also have cilia in our fallopian tubes in females. So why do we have these cilia in these locations? Well, in our lungs, think about when you breathe. When you breathe, is the air clean? No, right? There's stuff in it. And you can actually see the stuff in it. So when you breathe in, you're breathing in all that stuff, right? And it doesn't all come back out. So it gets stuck, and we don't want that stuff to stay in our lungs. So you've got mucus that actually is coating your lung cells to catch that material, just like you have mucus that lines the inside of your nose to catch material. This mucus, though, needs help getting back out. It's too thick and heavy to just make it out on its own because of gravity. So these cilia, these little guys right here, again, like I said, you'll see this in the video, this video here, that our lung cells have, are going to push that mucus up out of our lungs and up your trachea. I know it's gross, right? But it's going to push it up your trachea and up into your esophagus. Most of the time we don't notice it. Sometimes if you cough and get like that big loogie, you know what I'm talking about, right? That's actually what's going on. You're getting that big old lump of gunk coming up from your lungs. Sometimes it's coming from your head, but sometimes it's coming up from your lungs. And that way it'll go into your esophagus and your digestive system will digest and take care of the stuff for you. Cilia in the fallopian tubes, that's because human eggs don't have any way to move. And the egg needs to move from the ovaries down to the fallopian tubes. And so let me draw a really bad version of this. So you've got the ovaries out here with our little egg that's been released. So the fallopian tubes come out and around like so and down. So the tube is lined with these cilia, and so the cilia are going to create a current, and they're going to pull the egg down by pulling the fluids that direction. And so the egg will get pulled down, and what human cells have each? Well, I've told you where the cilia are. There's only one human cell that has a flagella. And I bet you can guess which one it is. It is the sperm, right? And this is one of the main reasons why sperm have tails, because fertilization happens up here in the fallopian tubes, not farther down in the uterus. And so these sperm have to swim the entire distance, including going upstream, to make it up here to do the fertilization. All right. Okay, so that's some cell structure. So let's talk a little bit about single cells versus multicellular organisms. So let's think about it. If you have only one cell, what do you have to be able to do? You take a look at these guys down here. Who's having a better party, right? I mean, if you are a single cell, like one of those single cell organisms, like a cilia or I'm sorry, like a paramecium or an amoeba, if we flip back, if you're one of these guys, so that's why I said cilia. This is a paramecium, this is an amoeba, this is what we call a euglena. If you're one of these guys, you're a single cell. You're all by yourself. If you're all by yourself, you have to do everything, right? You have to be able to do absolutely all of the jobs. So you have to take care of waste. You have to take care of making energy. You have to take care of moving yourself around. You have to do all of it. Multicellular organisms, on the other hand, can specialize, right? Because you have all of these different cells, so you can assign sets of them different jobs. And so this is why we have things, for example, our red blood cells in humans, they don't have anything in them. They don't have DNA. They don't have mitochondria. They don't have the little energy generators. They don't need them because their only job is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide around our body. They don't even need any way to get moved around. They don't need a flagella or cilia or anything like that because they get pumped around our body by our circulatory system. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the organization on multicellular organisms, because single cell organisms, the unicellular organisms, they have everything. They can't specialize, but multicellular organisms do have to specialize their cells, and they organize them in a pretty specific way. So those cells are going to get grouped into what we call tissues. So tissues are groups of cells performing a specific function. So they're going to just perform one function. So what are some examples of tissues? So this would be like muscle tissue or nervous tissue, right? The tissue is just that group of cells that are performing a certain function. If you then take those tissues, so for example, if you've got your skin is an organ. It's actually built out of multiple types of tissues. You've got I think it's 3 layers of tissue. I always have to look it up. But those tissues together make up an organ. So an organ is a structure in the body built of tissues that has a specific function. So if we go back to tissue, there's muscle tissue, but there's different types. So there's smooth muscle tissue, there's striated muscle tissue. They work differently, right? But then if we put them together into one special structure, now we've got an organ. So for example, a heart would be an example of an organ. That heart is made up of multiple types of muscle tissue that work together in concert to do the function of pumping. Okay. Then you get an organ system. That organ system is a set of organs that is responsible for a particular body function. So an example tied to the heart that we have here, the organ system would be the circulatory system. And so it would be the heart, and then the arteries, the veins, the capillaries. Those would be all the different organs that are tied into that organ system. So try and think of other organs and organ systems that you know of. There's a bunch of them, right? So I've been talking about the circulatory system, but there are other ones. You've probably heard of things like the nervous system, right? Or the skeletal system, right? So try and think of some of those and what pieces and parts go along with them.